The wind howled like a hungry wolf, biting at Elena's thin dress as she stumbled through the Colorado wilderness. Her breath puffed out in white clouds, quickly swallowed by the vast, unforgiving landscape. Every step was a battle against the rocky ground and the gnawing fear that Ricardo, her brother, was close behind. Elena wasn't running from just a brother. She was running from a shadow that had haunted her for years. Ricardo's anger was like a storm, unpredictable and destructive, and Elena had been caught in its path too many times. She knew if he found her, she would never escape. She clutched a small, worn leather pouch containing the few coins she had managed to snatch before fleeing. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy a little food, maybe a blanket. Pride, once a shield, was now a heavy weight. She had always been fiercely independent, taking care of herself and trying to protect others from Ricardo's cruelty. But now, alone and vulnerable, she realized that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Survival meant swallowing it down and accepting help if she could find it. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, but Elena couldn't appreciate the beauty. All she felt was the chilling dread of the coming night. She needed shelter and fast. As darkness crept in, she spotted a flickering light in the distance. Hope surged through her, a fragile flame in the face of despair. She cautiously made her way towards it, her heart pounding in her chest. Was a friendly homestead, or something far more dangerous? She approached a small cabin, smoke curling lazily from its chimney. A dog barked, a deep, warning sound that made her freeze. A man emerged from the cabin, his face weathered and kind under the dim light of the porch lantern. He carried a rifle, but his eyes held no malice. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice rough but not unkind. Elena hesitated, her throat tight with fear. Could she trust him? Trust had been a dangerous thing in her life, a weapon Ricardo often used against her. But she was desperate. "My name is Elena," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I need help." The man lowered his rifle slightly, his gaze softening. "What kind of help?" I'm lost," she stammered, avoiding his eyes. It wasn't a complete lie. She was lost, in more ways than one. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. "Come inside, girl. You look half frozen. I've got some stew on the stove." Elena hesitated again, her instincts screaming at her to run. But the cold was seeping into her bones, and the thought of warmth and food was too tempting to resist. She took a tentative step forward. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." As she crossed the threshold of the cabin, she knew she was entering a new chapter of her life. Whether it would be a chapter of safety or danger, she couldn't yet tell. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could survive. The stew was thick and hearty, filled with chunks of meat and vegetables that warmed Elena from the inside out. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, her eyes darting around the small cabin. It was simple but clean, with a fire crackling merrily in the hearth and a few well-worn books stacked on a shelf. The man, whose name was Thomas, watched her with a quiet understanding. He didn't press her with questions, allowing her to eat in peace. Once she had finished, he offered her a mug of hot tea. "So," he said finally, his voice gentle, "you said you were lost." Elena nodded, setting down her mug. I got separated from my family," she lied, unable to bring herself to reveal the truth about Ricardo. "We were traveling west, and I wandered off." Thomas raised an eyebrow, but he didn't challenge her story. "Traveling west is a hard journey," he said, "especially for a young woman alone." Elena shivered, remembering the dangers she had already faced. The threat of wild animals, the harsh weather, and the even greater threat of men who saw a lone woman as an easy target. "I can take care of myself," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Thomas chuckled softly. "Maybe you can, but out here, everyone needs a little help sometimes." He offered her a place to sleep on a cot in the corner of the cabin. Elena gratefully accepted, wrapping herself in a thick wool blanket. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and she slowly began to relax. But sleep was fitful, filled with nightmares of Ricardo's angry face and the sound of his booming voice. The next morning, Thomas offered her breakfast, a simple meal of biscuits and gravy. After they ate, he sat her down at the table. "Elena," he said, his eyes serious, "I can see that you're running from something. I don't need to know what it is, but I want you to know that you're safe here. For now." Elena's heart ached with gratitude. "Thank you, Thomas," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "Don't thank me yet," he said with a wry smile. "Living out here ain't easy. There's chores to be done, wood to be chopped, and animals to be fed." He offered her a chance to earn her keep, helping with the daily tasks around the cabin. Elena readily agreed, eager to prove her worth and to keep her mind occupied. As the days turned into weeks, Elena found herself settling into a routine. She helped Thomas with the chores, learning how to chop wood, milk the cow, and tend to the small garden. She discovered a newfound strength within herself, a resilience she never knew she possessed. But even as she found comfort in the routine, the fear of Ricardo lingered in the back of her mind. She knew he wouldn't give up easily. He would search for her, driven by his anger and his need to control her. One afternoon, while she was gathering eggs from the chicken coop, she saw a rider approaching the cabin. Her heart leaped in her throat. It couldn't be, could it? She peered through the slats of the coop, her breath catching in her chest. The rider was still too far away to identify, but there was something familiar about his posture, the way he sat on his horse. Fear gripped her, cold and paralyzing. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Ricardo had found her. Elena's breath hitched as the rider drew closer. It was Ricardo. There was no mistaking the set of his shoulders, the arrogant tilt of his head. He hadn't seen her yet, his gaze fixed on the cabin. Panic seized her. She had to warn Thomas, to protect him from Ricardo's wrath. She scrambled out of the chicken coop, her legs trembling. "Thomas!" she cried, running towards the cabin. "He's here. Ricardo's here." Thomas emerged from the cabin, his rifle in hand. He squinted at the approaching rider, his expression grim. "Get inside, Elena," he said, his voice firm. "And stay there." Elena hesitated, unwilling to leave Thomas to face Ricardo alone. But she knew she would only be a liability. She ran inside, her heart pounding in her chest. She watched through the window as Ricardo dismounted and strode towards Thomas. They exchanged words, their voices too low for Elena to hear. She saw Ricardo gesture wildly, his face contorted with anger. The confrontation seemed to last an eternity. Finally, Ricardo turned and remounted his horse. He glared at the cabin, his eyes burning with hatred, before riding away. Elena sagged against the wall, weak with relief. He was gone. For now. Thomas came back inside, his face etched with worry. "He knows you're here," he said, his voice grave. "He'll be back." Elena nodded, her stomach churning with dread. She knew Ricardo wouldn't give up. He would keep hunting her until he found her, until he dragged her back to the life she had escaped. "I have to leave," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't put you in danger." Thomas shook his head. "You can't go out there alone, Elena. It's too dangerous." "It's more dangerous for you if I stay," she insisted. "Ricardo will hurt you." They argued for a while, but Elena was adamant. She couldn't stay, not with Ricardo lurking nearby. She had to protect Thomas, even if it meant risking her own life. That night, under the cover of darkness, Elena packed her few belongings and prepared to leave. Thomas tried to dissuade her, but he knew he couldn't change her mind. He gave her a small pouch of food and a blanket. "Be careful, Elena," he said, his voice filled with concern. "And don't trust anyone." Elena nodded, tears welling up at her eyes. "Thank you, Thomas," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You've been a true friend." She slipped out into the darkness, leaving behind the only safe haven she had known since fleeing Ricardo. The cold wind whipped around her, and the vast, unforgiving landscape stretched out before her. She was alone again, with only her wits and her determination to protect her. She knew the road ahead would be long and dangerous, but she was ready to face it. She had to be. Her survival depended on it. She had to keep moving, keep hiding, and keep hoping that one day she would finally be free. The bitter Colorado winter was coming, and Elena knew she needed to find a new place to hide, and quickly. Thomas's warning echoed in her mind. Don't trust anyone. But out here alone, who could she possibly rely on? Winter arrived with a vengeance. The wind howled relentlessly, driving snow into every crack and crevice. The landscape transformed into a blinding white expanse, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Elena shivered, her thin clothes offering little protection against the bitter cold. She huddled in a shallow cave, trying to conserve what little body heat she had left. The food Thomas had given her was dwindling, and she knew she couldn't survive much longer without finding shelter and more supplies. Days blurred into a frozen nightmare. Elena trudged through the snow, her feet numb, her face raw from the wind. She scavenged for scraps of food, but there was little to be found. The animals had long since sought shelter, and the few berries that remained were frozen solid. Just when she thought she couldn't take another step, she spotted a light in the distance. It was faint, barely visible through the swirling snow, but it was enough to rekindle a flicker of hope. Summoning the last of her strength, she stumbled towards the light. As she drew closer, she saw that it came from a large ranch house, smoke billowing from its chimneys. Hesitation gnawed at her. Could she trust the people who lived there? Thomas's warning echoed in her mind. Don't trust anyone. But she was desperate. She couldn't survive much longer on her own. She approached the ranch cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. A dog barked, and a man emerged from the house. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with kind eyes and a weathered face. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice strong but not unkind. Elena hesitated, her throat tight with fear. "My name is Elena," she said, her voice barely audible. I need help." The man studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You look half frozen," he said. "Come inside, get warm." He led her into the house, which was warm and inviting. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the smell of baking bread filled the air. He introduced himself as Sam Mackenzie, the owner of the ranch. Sam offered her a warm drink and a blanket. He didn't press her with questions, allowing her to thaw out and regain her strength. After she had rested for a while, he offered her a bowl of soup. As she ate, Sam watched her with a quiet curiosity. "What brings you out here alone in the middle of winter?" he asked. Elena hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. She decided to tell him a slightly altered version of the truth. "I'm traveling west," she said. "I got separated from my family during the storm." Sam nodded, his expression sympathetic. "That's rough," he said. "This is a hard land, especially in the winter." He offered her a job at the ranch, helping with the cooking and cleaning. Elena gratefully accepted, eager to earn her keep and to have a safe place to stay. As she settled into life at the ranch, Elena began to relax. Sam was a kind and generous man, and she felt safe in his presence. But even as she found comfort in her new surroundings, the fear of Ricardo still lingered in the back of her mind. She knew he was still out there, searching for her, and she couldn't let her guard down. She just hoped that this time she had found a place where she could finally be safe. But could she really trust Sam? And what would happen when Ricardo inevitably found her again? The questions swirled in her mind, keeping her awake at night. She was safe for now, but for how long? Life at the ranch slowly began to heal Elena. The routine of chores, the warmth of the fire, and Sam's quiet kindness created a sense of normalcy she hadn't experienced in years. She helped with the cooking, cleaning, and tending to the animals. She learned to ride a horse and even started to sing again, her voice tentative at first, but growing stronger with each passing day. Sam never pried into her past, but he was always there to listen when she needed to talk. He had a way of making her feel safe, of making her believe that maybe, just maybe, she could escape the shadow of Ricardo. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Elena found herself drawn to confide in him. The words poured out of her, a torrent of emotion she had kept bottled up for so long. She told him about Ricardo's anger, his controlling nature, and the constant fear she had lived with for years. She told him about Isabella Reyes, a young woman who had also been a victim of Ricardo's abuse. Isabella had tried to run away, but Ricardo had found her, and Elena couldn't bring herself to say the words. She simply broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Sam held her close, offering silent comfort. He didn't judge her, didn't try to minimize her pain. He simply held her, letting her cry until she had nothing left. When she finally calmed down, Elena felt a sense of relief she had never known before. Sharing her burden with Sam had lifted a weight from her shoulders, allowing her to breathe freely for the first time in years. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice hoarse. "I shouldn't have burdened you with all of that." Sam gently wiped away her tears. "You didn't burden me, Elena," he said, his voice soft. "I'm glad you told me. I want to help you." He told her about his own past, about the hardships he had faced and the losses he had endured. He had lost his wife to illness several years ago, and he knew what it was like to grieve, to feel alone and lost. Sharing their stories created a bond between them, a connection that ran deeper than friendship. Elena began to see Sam as more than just a kind employer. She saw him as a friend, a confidant, and maybe even something more. But the fear of Ricardo still haunted her. She knew he was still out there, searching for her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that their newfound happiness was fragile, that it could be shattered at any moment. She started having nightmares again, dreams filled with Ricardo's angry face and the sound of his menacing voice. She would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding in her chest, convinced that he was standing right outside the door. Sam noticed her distress and tried to reassure her. He told her that he would protect her, that he wouldn't let Ricardo hurt her. But Elena knew that Ricardo was relentless. He would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. She just hoped that Sam was strong enough to protect her, and that she was strong enough to face whatever the future held. She also hoped that Isabella Reyes, wherever she was, knew that she wasn't forgotten, and that Elena would do everything in her power to make sure Ricardo paid for what he had done. The memory of Isabella and the pain she suffered gave Elena the strength to keep going, even when she felt like giving up. The inevitable happened. One crisp morning, as Elena was hanging laundry on the line, she saw him. "Ricardo." He rode up to the ranch, his face a mask of false concern. "Elena," he called out, his voice dripping with mock affection. "I've been so worried about you. I thought something terrible had happened." Elena froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew what was coming. Sam emerged from the barn, his eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice cold. "I'm just here to see my sister," Ricardo said, his gaze shifting to Elena. "She ran away, and I've been searching for her ever since." "She doesn't want to see you," Sam said, stepping protectively in front of Elena. "You should leave." Ricardo's smile vanished, replaced by a look of cold fury. "She stole from me," he said, his voice hard. "She took a lot of money, and I want it back." Elena gasped. It was a lie, a blatant attempt to manipulate the situation. She had taken only a few coins, enough to buy food. "That's not true," she cried. "I didn't steal anything." Ricardo ignored her, turning to Sam. "I'm going to report this to the sheriff," he said. "She's a thief, and she needs to be brought to justice." Sam scoffed. "I don't believe you," he said. Elena wouldn't do that. But Ricardo had already turned and ridden away, leaving Elena trembling with fear. She knew he would carry out his threat. He would do anything to control her, even if it meant sending her to jail. A few days later, the sheriff arrived at the ranch. He was a gruff, no-nonsense man, but he seemed fair. He explained that Ricardo had filed a complaint, accusing Elena of stealing a large sum of money. Elena protested her innocence, but the sheriff seemed skeptical. He had heard Ricardo's side of the story, and he was inclined to believe him. "I'm going to have to take you in, Miss Martinez," he said, his voice firm. "I need to investigate this matter further." Elena's heart sank. She was being arrested, even though she had done nothing wrong. She looked at Sam, her eyes filled with despair. Sam stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "I'll vouch for her," he said. "Elena wouldn't steal from anyone." The sheriff hesitated, but he couldn't ignore Ricardo's complaint. "I'm sorry, Mr. Mackenzie," he said. but I have to follow the law. He placed handcuffs on Elena's wrists and led her away. As she was led to the sheriff's wagon, Elena looked back at Sam, her eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. Would he believe her? Would he help her? Or would she be left to face Ricardo's lies alone? Sam watched as the wagon disappeared down the road, his heart heavy with worry. He knew that Elena was innocent, and he was determined to do everything in his power to help her. He knew that Ricardo was a dangerous man, and he wouldn't let him get away with this. He had to find a way to prove Elena's innocence and expose Ricardo for the liar that he was. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to do whatever it took to protect the woman he was starting to love. Sam acted quickly. He knew Elena was innocent, and he wouldn't let her rot in jail based on Ricardo's lies. He rode into town and sought out the best lawyer he could find, a sharp-tongued woman named Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was known for her unwavering dedication to her clients, especially those who had been wronged. She listened intently as Sam explained Elena's situation, her brow furrowed with concern. "Ricardo Martinez, you say?" Sarah asked, tapping her pen against her notepad. "I've heard whispers about that man. He has a reputation for being difficult." Sam nodded grimly. "He's more than difficult," he said. "He's abusive and controlling. He's been tormenting Elena for years." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "And he's accusing her of theft?" "It's a lie," Sam insisted. "He's just trying to get her back under his control." Sarah leaned back in her chair, considering the situation. "This is going to be a tough case," she said. "It's his word against hers, and he's a respected member of the community. We'll need to find evidence to prove that he's lying." Sam was relieved to have Sarah on their side. He knew she was the best chance Elena had. "What can I do to help?" he asked. "Start by talking to anyone who knows Ricardo," Sarah said. "See if you can find anyone who has witnessed his abuse or who knows about his past. We need to build a case that shows he's not a credible witness." Sam immediately set to work, riding from ranch to ranch, talking to anyone who would listen. He discovered that many people were afraid of Ricardo, but some were willing to share stories about his temper and his controlling behavior. He even found a few people who had witnessed him abusing Elena in the past. Meanwhile, Sarah visited Elena in jail. Elena was scared and disheartened, but she was also determined to fight for her freedom. "Sam believes me, doesn't he?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He does," Sarah assured her. "He's hired me to defend you, and we're going to do everything we can to prove your innocence." Sarah explained her plan to Elena. They would focus on exposing Ricardo's lies and showing the court that he was the one who was untrustworthy. They would also try to find evidence of his past abuse, to show that he had a motive for wanting to control Elena. Elena was grateful for Sarah's help. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to fight for her freedom, to escape Ricardo's grasp once and for all. As the trial date approached, Sam and Sarah worked tirelessly, gathering evidence and preparing their case. They knew they were facing an uphill battle, but they were determined to fight for justice. They believed in Elena, and they wouldn't let Ricardo's lies destroy her life. They hoped that the truth would prevail and that Elena would finally be free. They knew that the trial would be a difficult and emotional ordeal, but they were ready to face it together. Elena's future depended on it. The power of the truth was all they had. The courtroom was packed. The air was thick with tension as Elena sat beside Sarah, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across the room, Ricardo sat smugly, confident that he had already won. The trial began with Ricardo taking the stand. He recounted his version of events, portraying himself as a loving brother who had been betrayed by his thieving sister. He claimed that Elena had stolen a large sum of money that he had been saving to start business. Sarah cross-examined him relentlessly, exposing inconsistencies in his story and highlighting his controlling behavior. She called witnesses who testified to Ricardo's temper and his past abuse of Elena. It was a grueling process, forcing Elena to relive the most painful moments of her life. But she remained strong, her voice clear and unwavering as she told her story. She spoke of Ricardo's anger, his controlling nature, and the constant fear she had lived with for years. Then Sarah called a surprise witness, Maria Rodriguez, a woman who had been a close friend of Isabella Reyes. Maria testified that Isabella had confided in her about Ricardo's abuse and his controlling behavior. She revealed that Isabella had tried to run away, but Ricardo had found her, and Maria hesitated, tears streaming down her face. "He killed her," she sobbed. "He killed Isabella." A gasp swept through the courtroom. Ricardo's face turned white, his eyes wide with panic. Sarah pressed Maria for details, and Maria recounted the events that had led to Isabella's death. She explained that Ricardo had been furious when Isabella tried to leave him. He had beaten her so badly that she had died from her injuries. He told everyone she fell off her horse, and everyone believed him. The revelation of Isabella's fate shocked the courtroom. Everyone finally understood the true nature of Ricardo and the depths of his cruelty. Elena looked down at her hands, thinking of the life Isabella could have lived had she not been in Ricardo's reach. Ricardo took the stand again, desperately trying to deny Maria's accusations. But his lies were transparent, and no one believed him. Sarah had him right where she wanted him. In her closing arguments, Sarah painted a vivid picture of Ricardo as a manipulative and abusive man who would stop at nothing to control the women in his life. She argued that he had falsely accused Elena of theft to punish her for daring to leave him. "This trial is not just about theft," Sarah said, her voice ringing with passion. "It's about freedom. It's about a woman's right to choose her own destiny. It's about justice for Isabella Reyes." The jury deliberated for hours, the fate of Elena hanging in the balance. Finally, they returned with their verdict. "Not guilty," the foreman announced. A collective sigh of relief swept through the courtroom. Elena burst into tears, overwhelmed with emotion. She was free. The truth had finally prevailed. Ricardo's lies had been exposed, and justice had been served. It was a hard time, but Elena was strong. She had faced her demons and emerged victorious. And she knew that Isabella Reyes would finally rest in peace. Elena was thankful for Sarah and Sam, who had worked tirelessly to prove her innocence. She also knew that many women like her weren't believed, and that there was still a long way to go before every woman was safe. She would never forget this experience, and she would use it to help others who were in similar situations. This trial had changed her life forever, and she was grateful for the opportunity to start over. The future looked brighter than it ever had before. She was ready to embrace it. Elena was free. The weight of Ricardo's lies and abuse had finally been lifted from her shoulders. She ran to Sam, who embraced her tightly, his eyes filled with relief and love. "You're safe now," he whispered, holding her close. "You're finally safe." Sarah smiled, watching them with satisfaction. She had fought hard for Elena, and she was proud to have helped her find justice. She also knew that Elena was lucky to have someone like Sam in her life. As Elena and Sam left the courthouse, they were greeted by a crowd of well-wishers. Many of the people who had testified at the trial were there, along with others who had heard about Elena's story and wanted to show their support. They cheered and applauded as Elena and Sam walked by, their faces beaming with joy. Elena had become a symbol of hope for the community, a testament to the power of courage and resilience. Ricardo, on the other hand, was shunned by everyone. His lies had been exposed, and his reputation was ruined. He was left alone and disgraced, his power and control stripped away. Elena and Sam returned to the ranch, where they were greeted by a warm fire and a hearty meal. They spent the evening talking and laughing, celebrating their newfound freedom. As Elena looked around the cozy ranch house, she realized that she had finally found a place where she belonged. She had found a home, a community, and a love that she had never thought possible. But even as she celebrated her freedom, Elena couldn't forget about Isabella Reyes. She knew that Isabella's death had not been in vain. Her story had helped to expose Ricardo's cruelty and to bring him to justice. Elena vowed to honor Isabella's memory by helping other women who had been victims of abuse. She wanted to use her experience to make a difference in the world, to create a society where all women could live free from fear and violence. Over the next few months, Elena and Sam worked together to build a new life for themselves. They expanded the ranch, adding new animals and planting new crops. They welcomed visitors from all over the territory, sharing their story and offering support to those in need. Elena became a respected member of the community, known for her kindness, her strength, and her unwavering commitment to justice. She was a role model for other women, showing them that it was possible to overcome adversity and to create a better future. She was finally free and safe. She had found love, community, and purpose. She had faced her demons and emerged victorious. And she knew that Isabella Reyes would finally rest in peace, knowing that her story had helped to change the world. Elena had a long life ahead of her, and she was excited to see what it would bring. She was no longer afraid of the future, because she knew that she had the strength and the support to face whatever challenges came her way. The end. The bond between Elena and Sam deepened with each passing day. They had faced adversity together, and their love had only grown stronger. They found comfort in each other's arms, sharing their hopes and dreams for the future. One sunny afternoon, as they were riding through the fields, Sam stopped his horse and turned to Elena, his eyes filled with love. "Elena," he said, his voice soft, "I love you more than words can say. You've brought so much joy and happiness into my life. Will you marry me?" Elena's heart leaped with joy. She had dreamed of this moment for so long, but she had never dared to believe that it would actually happen. "Yes, Sam," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I will marry you." Sam slid off his horse and knelt before her, slipping his simple gold ring onto her finger. They embraced, their hearts overflowing with love. They were married a few months later in a small ceremony at the ranch. Their friends and neighbors gathered to celebrate their union, showering them with love and blessings. Sarah Jenkins served as Elena's maid of honor, her eyes sparkling with happiness. She had become a close friend of Elena and Sam, and she was thrilled to see them find happiness together. The wedding was a joyful occasion, filled with laughter, music, and dancing. Elena and Sam were surrounded by the people they loved, and they knew that they were starting a new chapter in their lives, filled with hope and promise. They built a happy life together on the ranch, working side by side to create a thriving home. They welcomed children into the world, filling their lives with even more love and joy. Elena never forgot about Isabella Reyes, and she continued to honor her memory by helping other women who had been victims of abuse. She and Sam established a foundation to provide support and resources to women in need, offering them a safe haven and a path to a better future. They showed the world that love and kindness could win, even after bad things happen. They proved that it was possible to overcome adversity and to create a life filled with happiness and purpose. And as they grew old together, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, they knew that they had built something truly special. They had created a legacy of love, kindness, and justice that would inspire generations to come. Elena had come a long way from the scared and vulnerable woman who had fled Ricardo's abuse. She had found strength within herself, and she had found love and support in the most unexpected places. She had learned that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford, that trust could be deadly, and that sometimes survival meant accepting help from strangers. But most importantly, she had learned that love could conquer all, and that even after the darkest of times, there was always hope for a brighter future. And so, Elena Martinez McKenzie lived a long and happy life, surrounded by the love of her family and the respect of her community. She was a true testament to the power of the human spirit, and her story would continue to inspire others for years to come. Love always wins. The end.